Hi, welcome. I am Dr. Mary Hadley. I'm a lecturer in law, and today I'm going to be talking to you about issue statements in the context of the IRAC, otherwise known as ILAC, otherwise known as IRAC, problem-solving method. So the problem-solving method, which requires you to state the issue, outline the law or the rule, apply the law or the rules to the facts, and then offer a conclusion. Okay, so in terms of what I'll be doing in the next couple of slides, I'll be showing you some student examples and then talking about how in this particular example, the student is, I guess, demonstrating one of the common problems that I see with issue statements. Because issue statements are quite straightforward. I mean, it just requires you to state what the legal issue is. But I think I wouldn't say deceptively difficult to get it right, but I think there are clear things you can do to make your issue statement stronger. Okay, so in the context of this issue statement here, what I see up the top here is a student introducing their issue statement. They're going a little bit into the facts. They're also starting to offer a little bit of a conclusion, okay, about if this, then this, all right? This is quite a common, I wouldn't say error or mistake, but it's quite a common thing that students do that they don't actually need to do unless specifically requested to introduce their issue statement in this way. So for me, if you started at this part here, that would be perfectly fine. Just jump right in, okay? All right, so that's the first thing around issue statements that I wanted to talk to you about. Now, the next example gives us another thing that I often see when it comes to issue statements, and that is a lack of specificity, okay? So the student here has identified that there's two primary legal issues at stake in this particular problem question. However, when they've talked about what those legal issues are, they haven't been sufficiently specific. So here they've just said, the issue is whether the party entered into or the parties entered into a legally binding contract. Okay, and then the second part of the sentence is a little bit clearer where they mention something called the termination of the rates discount. However, that of itself is not really specific enough, although the word termination does push me in the right direction, which is that this was a revocation of a unilateral offer issue. So I get a little bit of a sense about what's happening in terms of the specific legal issue from the back part of the sentence, but the front part is not sufficiently specific. So the first issue in this actual problem question was not of itself whether the parties entered into a legally binding contract, although I guess that is something that, you know, sits above the particular issue that I was looking for. But what I wanted to actually see here was students identify that this was an intention to create legal relations in the context of a government contract, which then obviously has ramifications or implications for whether a legally binding contract existed. So moving along to the next example then. Another common thing that I see students doing, particularly when they're in their very first subject where they're learning the IRAC method, so right at the start of their degree, students seem to be more comfortable, I guess, with recounting what happened before they before they drill down on what the actual legal issue is in the scenario. So what you might see is some recounting of facts at the outset, and that is what you see in this example here. Okay, so we've got what happened. There was a verbal agreement, you know, price was stated, then the views of the parties, then what happened next, okay? And then right down the bottom, the student mentions that there's a question of whether the council is bound to the contractual agreement. So here we've got too much recounting. We shouldn't really see facts in an issue statement. The facts are mostly relevant in the IRAC method in the application section where you're applying that law to the facts. Here also this student is not really specific enough when they do get to their issue statement, because this was a question of whether the preliminary agreement was binding, which is kind of implied in what they're stating here, but not well enough that as the marker, I know exactly what principles they're going to be using to resolve the issue. That they haven't made that clear enough because they haven't used that word preliminary agreement, which would tell me that this is a Masters and Cameron issue, which is what it was. Okay. Now, in terms of this particular example here, okay, the student identifies two factual issues, okay. Does the council owe damages to the other party, okay? Can they claim the rates discount that was advertised? I mean, they're important factual issues in this scenario, but they don't drill down on the actual legal issue. And what I mean by legal issue is I should be able to tell from their issue statement exactly what area of principles they're going to be applying to resolve that issue. And with that first example here, does the council owe damages to Grano? That doesn't tell me at all what area of law will be applied next, okay? So here the student needed to work in that language of intention to create legal relations, or alternatively have even mentioned that it was a government contract, therefore, you know, intention to create legal relations is a live issue on the facts. That language needed to be there. And the same with the second example here. So they've got the factual issue of can they claim the rates discount, but at the same time, the student has not made it clear that this is a revocation of a unilateral offer issue. It's not clear from that second sentence or that second question. It's not clear what law they're going to be applying next, okay? So how do you actually do something better? How do you improve? And I think having a look at exemplars of students that have done really well with their issue statements can be helpful. So this example for me does everything it needs to do in that it doesn't have too much recounting, it is sufficiently specific, and it does signal to me what area of law the student will be applying next, okay? So in order to determine whether the council has a successful claim for breach of contract against the transportation company, it must be established whether the promise to keep the offer open for 1 week formed an enforceable contract with the council. That to me instantly signals that this is an option contract issue, which it was, okay? And then the second part of the statement, whether TOP had validly revoked their offer before the council accepted it. That to me says that this is a revocation issue and most likely a communication of revocation issue because there was ultimately an acceptance too, which means that the timing is an issue in this particular scenario. This issue statement, to read it, I mean, like, it's not like you read it and you just instantly are like, oh, HT, but it does everything it needs to do. It is straightforward, it is simple, it is clearly stated, and it hits those criteria for me. It gives me everything that I'm looking for, all right? So I think when you're thinking about what a really good issue statement looks like, okay, simplicity is part of that picture. It just needs to do everything it has to do, and then the student can move on to the next part of the analysis. So yeah, hopefully these student examples and this exemplar at the end have been helpful. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like to subscribe. I have lots of other tips about different types of assessment tasks on my channel. All right, thanks everyone.